prostitutions, you had gangsters, you had everything that could go wrong was going wrong in that park. I can actually make money and make a difference at the same time. And then I was on fire. My mentor at the time said, "Hey, what are you doing with all that extra money?" And I said, "Well, I'm burning it. There's nothing I can do for the color of my skin." They grabbed us all. One officer pulled his gun out, put it to my head, and said, "Tonight you're gonna die."
When it comes to building wealth and building community, Karl Gorman doesn't believe you have to choose one over the other. As the founder and managing partner of GLH Capital, Karl is on a mission to close the wealth gap by helping investors access smart, strategic opportunities in real estate, while also revitalizing neighborhoods and empowering underserved communities. What started as a passion for financial literacy and economic mobility has grown into a respected private equity firm focused on real estate investment with impact. Karl brings a rare blend of financial acumen, street smarts, and servant leadership to everything he does, whether he's structuring a deal, mentoring new investors, or speaking on stages about the importance of ownership. In today's episode, Karl breaks down how he turned a vision into a fund, why representation in finance matters, and what it really means to give people the tools, not just the talk, to build generational wealth. Welcome to Give 'em the Business, the podcast where we go in depth with entrepreneurs, business leaders, and game changers who are building legacy, creating wealth, and leading with purpose. On today's episode, we have Karl Gorman, founder of GLH Capital. If you're enjoying this conversation, please take a second to subscribe and share it with your inner circle. That's how we grow, support each other, and create generational wealth. Welcome to another episode of Give 'em the Business. I'm your host, Troy Evans, and on today's show, we have the founder of GLH Capital, Mr. Karl Gorman. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. We've been talking about it for years.
I know, man. Getting to Atlanta's been fun, man. So this was awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are maybe, I had to think about it, but you might be one of my first West Coast guests in a long time. So you are going to let us know what's happening over there on the West Coast and how to make some money and give us the business.
I would like to give you all the business, man.
All right.
For sure.
So on our podcast, everyone always wants to know, how you making money and things of that nature. But, I tell them it always starts in the beginning. Yeah. It starts in the foundation.
Absolutely.
And for you, that happened in Michigan. Tell me what it was like growing up in Michigan.
Yeah, for sure. So Detroit, Michigan, shout out to my Pistons. But yeah, definitely, man. Had a two-parent household. So my dad was there. My mom was there. My dad got sick early on, so he didn't work. So he was a stay-at-home dad, which kind of complicated, the financial situation. So I like to say we didn't have much, but, we didn't know that, right? So we lived in an apartment, a two-bedroom apartment. It was the four of us. And it was a humble beginning. But saying all that, I do look back and reflect on those moments, and I always felt like there was love in the household, right? My dad and my mom both were servants, right? So they told us that, we had to volunteer, we had to, do certain things in order to be a part of the family, and so we started volunteering and giving back to the Olympics, the Special Olympics, early on in life. I think I might have did my first volunteer there when I was 10, and every year after that we volunteered. So love was there, and always giving back was a huge component of kind of where we stood on, and even today that's what the brand is with GLH.
And did you have an inclination early on that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did you have a different career in mind?
Yeah, so completely different career. So, when I went to high school and even middle school, I was playing basketball, and I just wanted to, give back as much as I possibly can, and thought that, being a high school basketball coach or gym teacher or some kind of teacher would allow me to be in scenarios where I could coach and mentor young African-American men. And so had that, philosophy in my head all the way up until, my sophomore year in college. I was, at Western Michigan University. My major was university. And we were going to be, I was going to be a teacher. And essentially, that all changed on, that homecoming that, we spoke about at Michigan State University.
And so what happened at that homecoming?
Yeah, so my fraternity brothers and I were walking down the street, and we saw it was four of us, and we saw. I mean, it's homecoming, so there's a million people out there, but just like Western Michigan, Michigan State also has like I think a 4% minority or 4% African American population there. So, we're walking down the street and I see, a police officer, kind of, go, the other direction that we're going. And then I see him out of, my rear, my peripheral that he, spins around and he's coming towards us. Flips on the light and we're just walking. Again, we're just walking down the street. He flips on the light. He, asks us to, essentially like, stop. And then, before we knew it, there was two other officer cars that came up, and now we're, six officers around us. And my fraternity brothers were like, "Hey, Carl, you go talk to the police officers. You're better at this than we are." And so I said, "Okay." And so I said, "Officer, what would what's going on?" He says, "I need your identification, all of you guys." And I said, "No problem. You want driver's license or you want our student identification?" And he says, "Give me your driver's license." So I go back to our group. I say, "Hey guys, give me your stuff. Give me your driver's license and your student ID," because I thought the student ID would, give some credibility of why we were there. Handed him the information. At this point, now there's 12 officers around us. Well, now we're sitting down on the sidewalk, and they're just reviewing our information back in their squad cars. And so as we sit there and we wait, and it's probably about 45 minutes to an hour that goes by. And again, there's 1,000 people that are walking by us, just kind of looking and laughing. We're essentially sitting down on the curve, and you've got all these police officers around us like we've done something wrong. So they give us our information back, and hand us our all the cards back in my hand, and they were like, "All right, you guys are free to go." And we were all like, okay. And then my one fraternity brother said, "Well, why did you hold us in the first place?" Well, the police officers got very aggressive at that time. They grabbed us all, they flipped us upside down, and one officer, and I couldn't see my guys at that point, but one officer pulled his gun out, put it to my head, and said, "Tonight you're gonna die," and he used the N word. And we're all shocked. I mean, even looking back on it, it terrifies me a little bit because I think about people that don't understand what it's like to be an African American male. And at that point, I said, okay, it got cleared up. They I went black for a little bit, but essentially they put their guns back in their holsters and let us up and let us go about our way. And we essentially went back to the dorm rooms. We were going to go to my brother was playing football that day. We were going to go to the game and watch the game and hang out. And essentially we just went back to the dorm room and really discussed kind of what happened. In that moment, that was the defining moment where I said, "There's nothing I can do for the color of my skin. But what I can do is I can try to even the playing fields by making as much money as I possibly could make." My dad was not in financial literacy. My mom was not in financial literacy. So I didn't even know what that looked like. So I went back, to school that Monday. I talked to a counselor. I said, "Hey, I'm no longer want to be a gym teacher. I no longer want to be a coach. I want to make as much money as I possibly can make." And that counselor said, "Well, you have to go into sales." And I said, "Great. Point me in the right directions, and you have to go into business." And I said, "Great. Point me in the right direction." So went signed up for the change my major, and essentially that was when the dream or the thought initiated was, okay, I'm going to make as much money as I can as fast as I can legally.
That's a unfortunate story, and what's even probably more unfortunate about it is it's all too common for young black men in the United States, and I can uh, see and agree with the conclusion you came to,
Yeah.
that while it's not going to change the color of your skin, it will in some ways empower you in the country where the business of America is business, right? Is making money. And if you can stack the deck in your favor from that perspective, you and your family will have a better chance, right?
Exactly.
What so the other thing I find fascinating about that is, you had the wherewithal to say, let me change directions. And the counselor says to you, sales is gonna be your way out of this situation. And I find it interesting that many people don't understand and they're afraid of right selling, but they don't understand that no matter what you do in business, you got to be able to sell it to somebody. Talk to me about what you learned about sales and where that took you in your corporate career.
Yeah, for sure. So, I got out of college, pretty quickly with a sales and marketing major and a finance major. A teacher, a professor said, if you're going to go into sales, you also got to know the other side of the coin, which is the financial piece. So, double majored in finance, and then got out of school and went right to corporate America, selling corporate benefits. So, worked for one of the largest financial institutions in the country, MetLife, and was their rock star. I worked 60, 70 hour work weeks. I didn't have a wife, didn't have any kids at that time. So, I was working weekends, I was working nights, I was working around the clock. But it essentially allowed me, they do a great job and all the insurance companies do a great job of kind of laying out what it looks like to be successful. Okay, you got to make 25 sales calls, you got to do this, you got to follow up with this. So they put that blueprint in front of me, and I just said I'm going to double it, right? So if it's 25 is the number, I'm going to do 50, and so I did, and essentially went from making they start you off at a small salary, from making $35,000 a year to making $550,000 a year just in those first 5 years that I was with Met. Got recruited to go to another large financial institution called Sun Life. They were Assurant at the time; they're now Sun Life. And then left Sun Life and went to Voya Financial, where I spent, again, a better part of 20 years in corporate America sales, really understanding how to sell, but not only that, which was subconsciously I was understanding business, right? So in selling corporate benefits, you're talking to CFOs, CEOs, HR directors. You're understanding how business flows. You're understanding business ideas. You're understanding, all of the intricate details that go into running a business. I had first glance at that for 20 years. So in stepping aside and trying to start my own business, I didn't have to think about what should I do. It was just essentially, hey, find someone that you like and trust and know that they're successful at it, copy what they've done, and you can have a successful business too.
And so I heard you say you, from a work ethic standpoint, you basically doubled what was expected of you in order to achieve the results that you achieved. Do you attribute any other gifts or skills that you learned to being successful at sales?
Yeah, I think transfer and trust is a big deal, right? So in any sale, you're going to have to let the other person know that you're trustworthy. And essentially, for me, I really lead with honesty. I mean, you talk to my wife, maybe sometimes it's too honest. But I lead with honesty, right? If it's not a good fit, if you're not a good, person for my product, I won't sell it to you. Same with this. It's the exact same scenario now, which investors are investing into GLH. And if you're not a good investor, I will tell you that, this is probably not the opportunity for you. And, we're not the company for you. So I say, transferring trust is a huge component of being able to sell. There's a number of other things I think I do well. Communication, I think, that's table stakes. I think following up with people's table stakes. And when I say table stakes, that's just the common things that you have to do in order to be successful. So communicating, following up, picking up the phone. There's a lot of people that are scared even today to pick up the phone and call somebody. That doesn't scare me at all. We were making, hundreds of calls a day back in the day, and picking up the phone. I remember my manager at the time threw me the phone book of the territory that I was going to have to go serve, and he was like, "Okay, get to dialing." Right. So, and you would go through the phone book and just call up people that had businesses and insurance, other insurance agencies in that town. So picking up the phone and following up and following through and being able to communicate are all things that I think are things that I do well, and that kind of provide me a certain level of success in business and in life.
And you got married while you were still in Michigan, right?
I did.
And what was the catalyst for the move to the West Coast?
Yeah, so we got recruited. So I got married to my wife, and then 6 months later we got recruited to Sun Life to go run that office in San Diego. And I told her, hey, and I'm going to go to work today, but think about it. But this is an opportunity. This is an offer that I think might make sense. And when I got home, the kitchen was packed. So it was no thinking. She was like, let's do it. And San Diego, Detroit. I mean, I love going back to Detroit. Detroit's always going to be home for me, but there's not a better place on the planet than San Diego from a weather perspective.
She was ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
San Diego is my favorite all year round city
Yeah.
in the US. So a little bit jealous of you from that perspective. But I would also have to imagine, right, that the cost of living in San Diego is tremendously more expensive than it is in Detroit and in Michigan. How did that play into your decision matrix on, you're gonna probably be making more money, but your lifestyle may take a hit a little bit.
Yeah. So I wish I could say that it was all orchestrated and I had this master plan, that how it has worked out, it has worked out. But it wasn't. I mean, it was like, hey, do you want to live in San Diego and versus Detroit? And the answer was yes, let's move to San Diego. Now, the thought was also is when we had kids or, if it didn't work out, we could always move back. And it's just we just haven't. I mean, we've got a second place in Cleveland, Ohio, that we kind of get a little bit of the Midwest feel, on summer breaks and winter breaks, but it's worked out tremendously in San Diego. And just to speak on the cost of living perspective, I mean, we bought our first house in San Diego, and it was 480,000, right? And we put down, call it 20% of that. So we put down 160,000 roughly. We have not added to that amount, right? So that first payment of $160,000, and we have bought now place. We've now bought in 4 places in San Diego, and all we do is just lever up the equity that we've accumulated in this place, roll it to the next property, and now we've got a pretty nice house in the suburbs, 6,500 square feet, a pool, jacuzzi, and a guest house. So, and again, never having to pay more money, out of to get the next place.
Power of real estate.
Exactly.
So you're in San Diego, beautiful weather, got your wife, haven't quite started the family yet, and work is going good.
Yep.
How long do you stay in corporate America before you start looking at starting GLH?
Yeah. So my mentor, at the time said, "Hey, what are you doing with all that extra money you're making?" Right. I live pretty frugal, and so does my wife. And so he was like, "What are you doing with all that extra money?" And I said, "Well, I'm burning it, right? I'm partying and vacationing and doing everything else." And he said, "Well, why not take some of that money and invest it into real estate?" So that was the first time I had even thought about doing that. And so he kind of helped me find a real estate opportunity. And I had just saved up about $1 million. And believe it or not, that $1 million, half of it was in my 401k and the other half of it was in my checking account. Again, not financially literate. And he says, well, let's take half of that and let's go buy a commercial building. And that was call it that was the start of it all. That was in 2012. And since then, it's just been compounding on things. And GLH was not even formed at that point, but was doing a little bit of real estate at that time. And then, once I started going, and GLH, we were, once we started flipping homes and doing hard money and all the things that we were doing, yeah, he suggested that we come up with a company and keep those, kind of separate from the family. And so GLH was then born, officially, 2018. Officially, GLH has been born, but I would say we were doing real estate in 2012.
And so you saved up a lot of money, so sales was going well for
Yep.
you. And you were able to put some money aside, and like you said, not financially literate because you had half in your checking account,
Right.
which is making you no money,
Losing you money.
right? Losing you money with inflation.
Right.
But then the other probably in a traditional retirement account, right?
Right.
Which I advise people all the time to not do that either, right?
Exactly.
Because that's not going to keep up with the pace of inflation.
Nope.
And so you've got a mentor, which is key
Yeah.
to entrepreneurs, right? Someone who can whisper in your ear that you respect and point you in the right direction. And he says, listen, make an investment in real estate. And so you go commercial, but you're still working a full-time job. How long did you continue to work and invest on the side before you said, you know what, the full-time job can go? And how did you know
Yeah.
that moment had occurred?
Yeah, I mean, it was at that time, I was making, $500,000 a year in sales, and then I was making another couple $100,000 a year on the side, flipping homes and doing hard money loans. And so, things were great. And so we decided, that we were going to do, a row of duplexes. So we did, and in this process, we did one flip, it worked out. We did two, it worked out. We did five, it worked out. So now we bought a row of duplexes, and it was right before, it was during COVID. Like COVID was hitting, and people were scared, and I wasn't. At times where people are fearful, that's when I kind of run in. And so this guy kind of sold us a row of duplexes for next to nothing. So we didn't have to displace anybody. And so we fixed up the outside, left everybody in. We took everybody that was on the inside, put them in extended stay while we fixed up the inside. And we're talking about a C-minus neighborhood. So it wasn't anything crazy, but we gave them a working stove, a working microwave, carpet, paint, countertops. So nothing crazy. And I was so once we were done, we went back, and I'm just kind of looking at it and taking video of it. And this African American lady, in her mid 70s, she's on a porch, and she's looking at me do this, and she comes down and she says, "Are you GLH?" And I said, "Yeah." And at that time, no one knew what GLH was. And she says, "Are you Carl?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Thank you for changing the community." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she says, "Well, this was a food desert before you fixed up these duplexes, but because of what you've done, we now have a local grocery store that's moved in." I said, "Well, what's a food desert?" And she says, "Well, we didn't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. You had to go across the county essentially to get access to go to a grocery store." I said, "Well, where would you guys eat?" And she says, "Well, there's a liquor store on every corner." And so we would go to the liquor store. There's delis in there, and we would eat the delis or the McDonald's that are associated with our neighborhood, fast food. And I said, "Interesting." And she says, "And because of what you did, we now have taken back, the park that's there." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "We called the police on all of the bad people that were in the park. So you had prostitutions, you had, gangsters, you had pretty much everything that could go wrong was going wrong in that park. And they called the police on, which is again what you don't do in the African American community." And then they went out and mowed the lawn. They went out and painted the structures. They went out and maintained the area, and now it's still maintained to this day. And she says, "Now we've got a place for our kids to play." And so she's telling me all these things, and I'm just thinking, in the back of my head, I've done really all of this to make money. I didn't do this to make a difference. And I paused and I said, well, wait a minute. I can actually make money and make a difference at the same time. And then I was on fire. That's when I quit my job. I told him that I'm gonna go do this full time. And my mentor was there. He was like, you gotta do this, but you gotta start raising capital. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? So we put together a fund. I called the attorney. I never forget that call. I called the attorney. I said, hey, I want to put together a fund. And he laughed. He said, okay, yeah, I mean, everybody does, Carl. That's cute. Why don't you raise $1 million and then come back to me? And I said, oh, well, shit, $1 million. That's a lot of money. And now the fund sits at about 15 million. We've raised over $15 million. We've done 300 properties or projects across the country, all in that C minus neighborhood, to get to people for to have pride of living there and pride of their community. And so, every day when I wake up and I think about the people that we're impacting, it propels me to move forward in a very rapid pace, right? Because I'm helping people. It's back to my philanthropic nature, and I'm making money all at the same time.
So you covered a lot of territory there, and
Yeah.
I want to dive. I want to dive in on a few aspects
Yeah.
to help the listener understand better. So, so your first investments, you mentioned two that you primarily focused on. One was fix and flip. So you're buying rundown houses, improving them, getting some instant equity out of the deal off the improvements that you made. Were you holding them or selling them?
Selling them.
Selling them.
Yep.
So immediately turning around there. And then you mentioned hard money. So were you the hard money lender in
I
those
was.
scenarios?
Yep.
So you were putting your cash up into deals
Yep.
at a significant interest rate in order to help someone else finance a fix and flip.
Correct.
And so was that going to be your entire business model up until that point when you
Yes.
were starting?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, and the hard money actually started first, right? So, the hard, because I didn't know anything about fix and flips. And, as I was lending my hard money and, you're lending it at, 12, 13, 14, 15% interest rate, you're like, man, if he can give up 15% interest rate, how much is he making? Right. So we were like, all right, let me go backwards on this thing. And so then we decided, all right, let's try to do a fix and flip. And you make all your money on the buy, right? So if you've got, a distressed buy or a distressed seller, divorce, they want to get out because they've got, a leak there, they've got a fire that's happened, all the scenarios under the sun I've seen. And if they are willing to move fast, we're willing to buy it. And essentially it helps. Sometimes not sometimes, most of the times it helps them too, because they need the capital. And so they're not looking to fix their own properties, list it on the market, wait for someone to put an offer in, wait to go through escrow. They need to sell that property pretty fast. So we're able to do that. And again, we can assess the neighborhood, see that the neighborhood is selling for, let's just make a number up, 250,000. If we get a house for 150,000, that's a good deal, right? Knowing that we might have to put knowing that we might have to put $50,000 into the property to get it to the standard that we can sell it, but you just made $50,000. And if you do it right, and if you finance it right, your cash on cash return is significant.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please don't keep it a secret. Take a moment to subscribe and share this episode with your circle. That's how we support each other, and that's how we build wealth. And then also, as a hard money lender, again, for the listeners, you are protected because you have the asset backing you.
Correct.
If things don't work out, then it now becomes your house. And
Yep.
so it's a relatively safe play
Yeah.
for your money. And normally under a year turnaround time, which is a very nice return,
Yes.
we charging 12 to 15%, right?
Absolutely.
So you're on a mission for money in the beginning.
Yep.
Diversify your assets. as Kevin Hart would say, the way your checking account and savings
Yeah,
account
right,
was set up, you needed to move it around. Uh, but then you get motivated by someone who benefited from the work you were doing in the community, which really lit you on fire to say, "Listen, I'm going to do this full time and
Yeah,
walk away
yeah,
from my paycheck."
yeah.
Did you have any doubts or concerns in relation to giving up that $500,000 paycheck when you maybe had not quite, done at least a 500,000? And even if you
Yeah,
were doing a 500,000
yeah,
and fixing flips a year,
right.
that's 1,000,000 when you
Yeah,
add them
yeah,
together, right?
exactly.
Did you have doubts or concerns about lifestyle or
Yeah.
things of that nature?
So not personally, no, but everybody around me thought I was crazy, right? And I mean, family members, friends, relatives, my company, they were like, "You're walking away from this $500,000 cushy job. You're on pace to do whatever and go wherever." And I say, "Yeah, but it doesn't excite me. It doesn't feed my soul." And I didn't even really know that it was something out there that could possibly do that, right? That could feed my soul and feed my family. Do good, while doing good, right? Is our slogan. So, like, I mean, you know, yes, it was a ton of doubters out there, but I knew that, if I put the chips on me, I'm betting on myself. I'm gonna go down fighting, and more than likely I'm not gonna go down. And I had a lot of other people that were in my corner too. So my mentor, who I've mentioned, he's been my mentor for the last 23 years. He was like, "You got to do this." My brother, who's been an entrepreneur himself, bet on himself 20 years ago, has a successful business that he's running now. He's like, "You got to do this." So I had a couple people in my ear that were saying, "Yes, we believe in you. Go do it." And I think that this could be really, really successful. But the rest of the people thought I was crazy.
Now, did you have the added responsibility of kids at that moment?
I did. Yep. So we had a full house. We had just bought, our house that we're in now. I had a full house of kids. I had, my son and my twin girls. And my wife was not working, right? So, it was like, you're gonna walk away from this, health insurance and your 401k and all these things that people tell you that are things that you should be focusing in on. And you're just gonna go and bet on yourself, and the answer is yes. And I will say, if you for people who are thinking about this, you have to think about it differently, right? So if you're working a W-2 job in the state of California, I don't know how it is here in Atlanta, but in the state of California, if you're making a $500,000, you're paying a half of that to the federal government. Half of that income is going back to into taxes, right? So you're really not making a 500,000. You're really making 250. And if you are owning your own business and you're writing off all of your liabilities or your expenses as you go down, whatever you make, and then all of your expenses, that's the end of that is what you get taxed on. So it's if you're financially literate, or you can consult with a CPA, there is a ton of stuff that we were going to do anyway that could potentially be expenses on this column versus having a W-2, getting taxed by that W-2, and you're left with this, and then you have your expenses. So it's kind of hard to describe, but for the folks that are savvy out there, they know exactly what I'm talking about. You will make a significantly more money being an entrepreneur than a W-2 income, just because of taxes.
Right. And so you're in San Diego, you're lending, you're investing in properties as well. At what point did you start thinking about going beyond San Diego and beyond, necessarily just a fix and flip model?
Yeah, so we were doing also a couple ground up constructions, as we were in that same phase. We thought ground up construction it's the part to get to where you actually are building may take some time, but once you start building vertical, it's the same as a fix and flip. And so we decided, we're gonna go. Also, because now I've got a little bit more autonomy and time. Now I'm spending, time in Cleveland with the family during the summer. I don't have to go to the office. I can work from there. And so we started doing some deals in Cleveland. Did call it a half a dozen to a dozen fix and flips that we did, and they were successful. And because of what we know about affordable housing, there are also things out there that allow you to build with other people's money involved, including the federal government, right? So the scenario that we're in now is that we are acquiring the land for essentially a dollar. We're building on that land. We're now getting a tax credit for 20% of the build costs. We're getting a tax abatement, so a 15-year tax abatement for that's transferable. So if we keep it, we don't have to pay property taxes on that property for 15 years. If we sell it, the new homeowner doesn't have to pay property taxes for 15 years. And we're on a task. I mean, there's 21,000 lots that are in Cleveland, Ohio right now. We've now taken over 2,000 of them, so we're going to build 2,000 single family homes in the next 4 to 5 years. And we're all going to be in that B minus C plus neighborhoods. And we're going to put people in homes.
Cleveland needs it. As you
Yeah.
know, I'm a native, so I appreciate the
Yeah,
the
exactly.
infrastructure that you're putting in place.
Yeah.
If you could only help the Cavs out right now. But I don't know. Can you got a jump shot?
Yeah, I used to.
But so then you also said that you've raised about 15 million
Yeah.
in capital. And oftentimes, especially for Black entrepreneurs, capital is the thing that
Yeah.
prevents them from growing, right?
Yeah.
From scaling, from getting to the next level.
Yeah.
Obviously, sales is a little bit a part of raising capital, right?
Yeah.
But how you said a
Yeah,
lot
a
of it,
lot of it,
right?
man. That's all it is. Yeah.
So what challenges did you
Yeah.
face not having an experience or background
Yeah.
in raising capital? What did you find is successful, and how are you leveraging the funds?
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions there, but the first thing I would say is that unfortunately, African American people don't buy from African American people, right? There's a lot of statistics around it. We don't trust each other. And in my fund today, I would say that there are out of the 50, 60 folks that are investing with GLH Capital, we got 3 people that are African American, right? So, the challenge was I'm going to start this fund and I'm going to go after the people that I know and love and trust me. And, you know, 2 challenges for them. One, they don't have the capital. And then 2, they don't trust that Carl can do this or another African American guy. And it doesn't have to, it's not, it's not personal to me because I've seen other really successful real estate guys that know what they're doing and they can't raise capital from our community. But that same friend that they're going to the bar with is taking their capital and investing it with somebody else that doesn't look like him. So it's not it was not me. It's just it's the community that we kind of grew up in. Fortunate for me is that I had a 20-year run of talking with other people that were making money like I was. So immediately when I left my job, I turned back to the community that I had in corporate America and said, "Hey, I'm now doing this. What do you want to invest with me? And here's what that looks like." And a lot of those folks trusted me because they knew me for a long period of time. They saw my success in what I was doing. So they realized that, if Carl can do this, he can do that. And so a lot of those investors or a lot of those, friends and coworkers and competitors that I was, that I was with in the insurance world, became my investors. And then, I would say, a big piece of it is that, I used a lot of my capital to get going. And then we sold, 10% of GLH, 2 Novembers ago for $4 million. for again to just have some liquidity into the fund and into the company. How that's leveraged. Again, by looking at other businesses that I've studied over 20 years and understanding how businesses run. I'm not a big proponent of a lot of overhead. We are. I mean, we've got a number of employees and they all work from home. I'm not spending money on, a ton of stuff that you could spend money on. I'm just not doing that. And I'm putting that money directly into projects, right? So somebody gives me 100 grand, that 100 grand is going into a project that we're going to develop and we're going to cultivate and they get their paid their interest. So and then the leveraging factor, that you ask about. I mean, real estate is one of those things that you can leverage, you know, you know, 1 to 4, right? So if I've got $1 million, I can buy $4 million worth of real estate. And so I continue to use that leverage point in all of the portfolio that we have because we do have a significant portfolio now because we have kept some. We're leveraging that portfolio and leveraging the funds that we have to build out these areas like Cleveland. But we're in Cleveland, Detroit, Indianapolis, Houston, Dallas, and in San Diego.
So that's was going to be my next question. Is you've expanded fairly rapidly, I
Yeah.
would say, into multiple states. What do you think, or what have you experienced, has been the challenge of managing projects, across the country,
Yeah.
and how have you been successful with it?
Yeah, I mean it's trial and error, right? So I think one of many flips that we've done, we've not had success on because the GC is not showing up or he's taking pictures of things that are not true. So we've had it's a challenging scenario when you're trying to manage something and you're 2,000 miles away. The infrastructure now that we have in place, there's really not much you can get away with because we've got people that are coming and auditing what we're doing, and so we're looking at after when we're paying people after the fact. So the GC is bringing their own money, doing what they need to do, and then we're paying them a draw only after an inspection comes, a real life person, and we can go into the weeds on how you find an inspector and how you get that done, affordably. Um, but yeah, so then they come in, they inspect the premises and the house, and then they let us know, and then we then release the funds for them to go to the next phase. So it's pretty dialed in now, and I've got a VP of operations. I've got some really good people that kind of get me focused, and bookkeepers and all the other things that you need, and accountants and lawyers that all tighten this thing up. And I'm more so now the visionary, and now it's like I'm living 5 years from now, right? So what's the next project that we're gonna do? Once we're done with Cleveland, what's the next spot? What's the next spot? So that's kind of how the business looks right now.
And so, being that visionary and talking about that 5 years, where do you want to be with the
Yeah,
company in 5 years, both uh,
yeah,
geographically, revenue,
yeah,
projects, et
yeah.
cetera?
So what I'm hoping for is that I just brought in a real estate marketing firm to help us raise capital. They put us in front of people that are accredited investors so that we can have that conversation with them. I'm hoping that we raise $35 million before the end of the year. I just brought on a full time salesperson as well. And she's going to be tasked with, calling these people and following up with these people and so on and so forth. So in 5 years, I hope that the fund is about $100 million fund. I hope that we are in, that we've completed Cleveland, and that we've also now, done some more stuff in Cleveland, or won another a contract so that we can do maybe 2,000 more or 5,000 more or whatever that may look like. I want to do that same model that we are doing in Cleveland and take it to Detroit. So we just won, 42 acres in Detroit, $1. We bought it for $1. We're going to put 156 homes on that plot of land, and I want to do that all across the country, right? And in the areas that need it, that need affordable housing. And we talk. We I've got a guy, you might know him, by the name of Ron Carson, who's on that works for GLH. He was in the White House for the past 25 years. What does he say that is the national crisis? It's housing. It's not violence. It's not guns. It's not drugs. It's homes. And so knowing that, I think we've got a really good runway for the next 10, 20, 30 years to put homes everywhere. And if we can do it with this model where, the city is now, is in the capital stack. We've got the foundations that are in that city in the capital stack. We've got the private sector, the funds that I've raised in that capital stack. We've got the banks. Everybody is working together to make this project work. So it's not a situation where we're waiting for permitting and surveys and the topography report. All of that is being sped up so that we can build rapidly. So, I'm a big thinker and big believer. So I think that, in 5 years, the fund's $100 million. I think we've got $100 million of equity in our projects that we've done. And we're well on our goal of putting 50,000 people in homes. So, in 5 years, 10 years from now, that's the goal.
So let's change up the pace a little bit and talk about your philanthropy,
Yeah.
because you've been recognized in San Diego for giving back to various causes and what have you, and you've even started your own foundation
Yeah.
around that. Talk to me about the origins of your philanthropy and why it's important to your business success.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just important as a human, right? So take business out of it for a second. I think just being a person that, exists on this planet just wants to be able to leave it in a better place than I found it, right? And I think, for me as an African American male, seeing George Floyd die and having my white counterparts that were working with me at the time said, "Can you believe this?" And I'm thinking, that was me. That was me. And so, for us, it's like, how do we, give back? How do we put people in great scenarios that look like us, right? So my wife and I started a foundation called Black Future Foundation. We've now given out 13 scholarships. So we're putting these 13, young boys and girls through school. We believe that if you are able to get to college and you have financial literacy, you're going to be at least you're going to be successful. The statistics are, the ages between 18 and 25. There's more African American men in jail than there are in college, right? So we're trying to figure out, how do we change that, right? If we can get you out of jail and in college, or maybe even get you in the trajectory before you even are starting to go down that path, to understanding that this is possible, right? You need to see it, and then you need to believe it, and then you need to work hard to accomplish it. And for us, if we see that in a young student, we're going to put our resources behind them so that they can be successful. Um, so that's, I mean, and the origin of that is giving back is addicting. There is no better feeling than to have someone call you and say, because of you, my son's gonna go to college. That's goosebump shit, right? Because of you, I now have a home. Because of you, I can now live in this neighborhood. I mean, those things are addicting. And no matter how much money is made in the business, I'll never get tired of hearing stories like that. And that propels the company. And then you attract good people. You attract good things. You attract investors that believe in the things that you believe in. You attract employees that will do without income so that they can support the cause. Right? I mean, you just have this buy-in from everybody when it's based on a good place. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
No, it does.
that's a
It
roundabout way
does.
of getting there. But yeah, man, I am as excited as I possibly can be when those things are happening. If I make some money on a deal, great. We are now made money on that deal. I can pay my investors. Everything else is great. But if I make a difference, it's about legacy, man, and that's what I want to leave for my, for GLH, which is Grant, Laurel, and Hallie. Those are, my kids' names. That's what I want to leave for them. I want them to say at my funeral, Dad made a gazillion dollars. He was a billionaire, but he had a heart and he gave back to all of these people. That's meaningful to me.
Indeed. And also, you've kind of started I wouldn't say it's a side venture,
Yeah,
but you had an experience with your brother where you're doing some golfing
yeah.
now and gotten a little bit of a following doing that too. Talk to me about the origins of how that came about
Yeah.
and like what role that plays in your leisure time now.
Yeah, for sure. So my brother's an entrepreneur. He is a serial entrepreneur. And so when we were thinking about starting to golf, and he said we're gonna just record ourselves on the golf course. And I was, at the time I said there's no one that's going to be interested in us playing golf. I mean, we're not that good, and who's going to be interested in that? Well, he had a vision for it, and his vision has come to fruition. I mean, we initially went out and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this in order to get our golf paid for." That was the goal. If we can just go to any golf course we want, pay because they have invited us, and all of the golfing, things that come with it, clubs, bags, hats, shirts, pants, shoes, sunglasses, all those things we want to include in that. If we can do that, we have been successful in this venture. And within the first 8 months, we had a number of top brands, Callaway, Bad Birdie. We had country clubs calling us. We had city clubs calling us to come play their course, and it was all because we are reviewing their course and making some remarks about it. It's pretty comical, or at least I think it's comical. And yeah, it's just taken off. And so with that, we started. We didn't want to take any money from these people that say, hey, we'll pay you. We were like, well, we don't really want to get paid. We just want your stuff. And that we got to the point where they were like, well, we can't give you enough stuff. I mean, we had too much stuff, so they had to start paying us. So my brother and I then started a marketing company. It's called G&G Marketing, and so inside of G&G Marketing is Gorman's Golf, and then we partnered with a couple other people, and we've got a golf simulation in that deal. We've got a track man, so we go to tournaments, and people hit in front of this track man, and we can send them their results. And all of that kind of feeds into our funnel of successful people coming to this track man. They're hitting off it. Now we got the list. Now we can call them to see if they're interested in investing in real estate. And it's fun, all right, and it's kind of trickled into a little media. So we went out to the Whole Classic, which is a PGA event in Newport Beach, and we were the press. So we got a chance to interview some of the celebrities. Reggie Bush was out there, Josh Allen, a couple other football players, and some other folks that were celebrities that I didn't know. And so all of this is just is fun. But and again, you're in a scenario where you're talking to people who have capital. You're talking about businesses. I mean, there's so many ideas that I've gotten on the golf course playing golf with my brother. We play 9 holes. It's 2 hours, and then we go to the 19th hole and have a couple drinks and talk. This whole business, the business. I wouldn't say the whole business is predicated, but the a lot of the great ideas that I've come up with have been by talking to him as he's gone through a lot of the growing and scaling pains of a company. So, a lot, there are some people out there that will say, well, this, you're spending a lot of time playing golf, and you focus on what you need to focus on. And I would say, yeah, that time that I'm playing golf is the best time that I can have during my week so that I can do what I can do.
Right. Recharge your batteries,
Hmm.
also networking and
100%.
all the business deals getting done on the golf course as
Absolutely.
well.
Yep.
And you didn't just stop within the borders of the US. You've traveled overseas and
Yeah.
done business as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we got a marble company in Dubai. I invested in the people. I mean, it's a husband and wife couple that run the business, and they're dynamic. I mean, they're smart, educated people. They can source marble pretty good, and so and again, having 20 years of seeing businesses thrive, I know what to do, right? So you can bring me about any business and I could look at it on paper and in its physical form and be able to point out a couple things that will completely change your revenue stream. We did that just recently with Golfden, and we did that with the company in Dubai. Their business model was selling to the end user. We just shifted that, or I just shifted that and said, let's sell to the malls. And so now we're in 3 Dubai malls, and we'll do hopefully $5 million in revenue in that company this year.
And in Dubai, mall culture is serious
Yeah,
out there.
really serious,
Right.
bro.
Everything revolves around the malls in Dubai.
100%. Yes.
So it seems like you're well on your way to those 5 and 10 year lofty business goals. If you and you are
Mhm.
giving advice right now to the next generation of
Mm.
entrepreneurs who are listening, what would you say to them to give them the business?
Yeah. So the first thing is find a mentor, right? There are people out there that have done what you want to do, and they have made all of the mistakes that you will make. If you can speed up time, if you can accelerate your time frame, why wouldn't you do that? Right? So find a mentor that is in the space that you're in, or that you want to be in, or you're trying to get to, and and become the mentee. Listen, there are so many opportunities or so many times where I give advice to young entrepreneurs or people in the business, and 90% of them don't take my advice, right? Same with my mentor. My mentor has mentored or has given advice to a lot of different people, and he feels the same way. 90% of them don't take his advice. So find a mentor, and then then take the advice. And then I would say, whatever business you're in, keep your overhead as low as you possibly can keep it until you can scale. And don't feel like you need an office space or an executive assistant or a manager or all these things that are going to put more cost on your business until you're ready to do that. And then the last point that I would share um, is lean into your strengths. Right, there are a number of people out there. I mean, I had this conversation with the chef that came over yesterday. I'm really good at cooking food, Carl, but I need to get better at marketing. No, bro, you need to cook the food. You need to find somebody who can market, and you need to incentivize them in a creative way that they feel like they're either making money or they're making a difference or they're doing something right. But trying to learn marketing or trying to learn financial, the accounting piece of your business, or trying to learn sales, like you need to lean into what you're good at. Um, and so if you're a technician and you are good with the computer and you need to figure out a way to get your message out, hire a marketing person or hire, fractional marketing person. And I look back on, my days were when I was in school, and, even now today, like if you wasn't good at reading, they want you to read more. If you wasn't good at spelling, they want you to spell more. If you wasn't good at math, they want you to do more math. And to me, I'm like, that's the opposite of what we should be doing. If you're good at math and you're not good at reading, do math. find somebody else that will do the reading. So there's a book called Who Not How. And when I read that book, I was like, exactly. Like the book basically talks about most people when they think about, I want to start a business and it's going to be a photography business. All right, now how do I do that? It's not how, it's who, right? Who can I find that can do these components of what this photography business will look like and employ them? Or again, come up with something that's creative that incentivizes them to work with you or for you. So I would say those are the top three things that I would recommend for any young entrepreneur.
Carl, we greatly appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on to the podcast and giving us the business. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to checking in 5 to 10 years to see where you at.
I'll be back.
All right, brother.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.